Okay, this is lecture 3 or degree number 3. If you can please do me a favor and subscribe to my channel, I would appreciate it. Um, Also, I recommend watching from the very beginning with lecture number 1 and then lecture number 2, and then this is going to be lecture number 3 because they all build upon each other. Um, it's necessary. I found that it was necessary to start history from the very beginning. Otherwise, you're left with a lot of holes and you don't understand certain things when they're left out. So I begin at the very beginning. Um, so this is part 3. We just to do a catch up in case this is, or just to do a summary of what we already talked about. We talked about dualism and how it's universal and found everywhere. Um, we talked about how math is the language of God that helps you to understand the mysteries of the universe. Um, we talked about how from Earth, looking up into space, humans gave God a face with its, you know, with the stars and the sun and the moon. So the sun and the moon are the two eyes of God, and then man on earth is the third eye. So if we're if somebody was looking at us from space and they're looking at Earth, then Africa with its eye at Lake Victoria looks kind of like Earth's face. Um, we talked about, so then the god Osiris and the god Horus are the third eye on Earth, and which what I feel they mean by that is that God can always see you, no matter what you do. He's always watching. Um, so he's watching at night, he's watching in day, he's watching you from the earth. So everything that you do, God can see, and so that's why it's important to do what you know is right. So then we move to where human-like species and where humans' origins began. All the research points to East Africa, specifically at right in this area, which you can see here on the map, specifically within this red area, this red outline area. This blue line is the equator, and just northeast of Lake Victoria. We talked about how Lake Victoria was not here yet until 4,000 years ago. We're going to begin discussing from about 28 million years ago with our earliest human-like primate species. So in this area, just actually south of the equator, is where a lot of fossil sites have been found. So yeah, we talked about how Lake Victoria wasn't here. Then we started talking about Lake Turkana, which is right here on the map. Lake Turkana is very important. It's been there for more than 4 million years ago, so it's been there ever since humans existed. We talked about how Lake Turkana at certain times filled and overflowed into the catchment that's here. Catchment is just where water collects, and if you scroll more east, then you'll come to the White Nile. So Lake Turkana actually helped to fill the White Nile and caused it to flood several times over the years. So that's kind of where we're at right now. This green shaded area is the area where most of the earliest fossil sites have been found. They're able to date them here because of the volcanoes and the rocks that are here. They're very old, so that's how they can get That's how the experts and archaeologists can get their dates. So let's go ahead and begin with today's portion of it. So we also talked about how the aquatic lifestyle that developed. So people living on the waters of Lake Turkana, um, that lifestyle and the evidence around the lake shows a um, connection with the Nile Basin. So the Nile Basin is over here. Here's the Nile Basin. The White Nile's right here. The water used to overflow into here, and the Nile crocodile. The Nile crocodile is the first reptile, or actually the first animal that we're talking about here. So that's important when you're thinking about Egypt. So the people living here had a relationship with the Nile crocodile. They would have encountered it if they were living around the lake, because this would have been all these any tributary any tributary lakes, or not lakes, rivers that connect to the Nile in here would have been full, and they would have been helping to fill the Nile, and the crocodiles could have passed through these rivers and came into Lake Turkana and lived inside Lake Turkana. That's how they got here. So this is particularly important at the time of about 200,000 years ago, when mitochondria Eve was living right here within the Omo, near the Omo River. Um, it wasn't just one woman, so don't think it's just one woman that we got our DNA with. It was Eve, all of her family, any other related women that lived within this area. So it's not only one woman. So the green shaded area here is the area where the earliest fossil sites have been found. Nowhere else on Earth have they found human-like fossils this early. So as people were living here in this area, in this red, they began to spread out northwards, mostly within the rift, but they would have spread north in through the rift into Ethiopia. They would have spread south through the rift and on the Serengeti Plain, which is right here, southward into South Africa. And then they also probably split through this way along the Nile and down the Nile, and possibly from up here from Oma down to the White Nile. So that's your migration pattern from the earliest human-like species. Why are they living in this area? Probably because of this area has been alive and well and active on the earth. A lot of active volcanoes, a lot of changes that are taking place within the earth in this area. The water, the atmosphere, other life forms, everything in this area all has to do with why humans developed here. Um, like I said before, I consider God intelligence. God is the intelligence within you, um, and it keeps evolving more and more and more. So He's actually getting smarter and smarter. He or she, whatever you want to call it. I just call it God for. I really call it intelligence, but I just call it God just to be, simple, since everybody understands that. And he's throughout the universe. He's not only here, he's throughout the universe. He's not actually the universe, but he's formed with inside the universe. Um, so it'd be interesting to know if the Nile crocodile, is the symbol of if it's one of the earliest symbols found in Egypt and used as a totem. Um, and we might be able to connect those tribal roots here to Lake Turkana. And we also might be able to connect kingship or kinship. Kinship, I'm pretty sure first it was kinship. They began to put more importance on their family ties, and then that developed with the aquatic lifestyle because they're fishing, they're collecting fish, they're selling fish, they're creating harpoons, canoe boats, things such as that, which the people that knew how to do that would give them an advantage and would give them wealth. So families that had more than others would, is what I believe, developed into kingship. And we'll talk more about that, and we'll get evidence for that stuff too. Okay, why I remember, because I forgot to do this last time. Let me go ahead and show you my sources. Um, so you know that. So here are my sources, if you can see these. Um, I'll go ahead and let you look at those for a minute. Holocene History of Lake Victoria, Journal of the Discovery of the Source of the Nile, The Great Rift, Africa's Changing Valley, um, a systematic revision of Proconsul with a description of a new genus of early Miocene hominid, Lake Turkana and its link to the Nile, environmental assessment of East African Rift Valley lakes. So this is where I'm getting all my information from. Atlas of World Population History, the Anthropology of Skin Colors, the evolution of bipedality and loss of functional body hair. We're going to talk about that. Trophic models of aquatic ecosystems, the gods of the Egyptians, the Congo, the 200,000 year evolution of Homo sapiens sapiens. So you can see I got a lot of sources here that we're talking about. The origin and evolution of primitive man. So this is where I'm getting my information from, so you know that I'm not just making things up here. I spent a lot of time working on this, so I hope you take it seriously and you spend the time to watch these videos. Okay. So Lake Turkana and the Great Rift Valley have had and still experience to this day volcano activity. So you can see where we're talking about. The shorelines of the lake show evidence of eruptions, and these occur in the period of the Miocene. Probably late Miocene is about 10 million years ago to about 5 million years ago, and to the Pliocene, which is after 5 million years ago. And so all this volcano activity has been dated. The lake contains three. We're talking about Lake Turkana here. We're still talking about Lake Turkana. Um, the lake contains three volcano islands at its north, center, and south within inside the lake. And the one at the south end causes a barrier and is rich in salt. So we also talked about how early people used salt. So when the water evaporates, the salt is left on the surface. People can go and collect that, and they can use it for whatever. They can use it for their cooking. They can trade it. Um, the salt is used by the locals today, and there is no reason to think that it wasn't used thousands of years ago. The Turkana Basin is still tectonically active to this day. Sediment structures within the lake remain preserved with the help of epifaunal detritivores, detritivores, which are decomposers who live on the lake bottom instead of invertebrates that would destroy them. The last time that Lake Turkana was an open basin lake, meaning it drains into a river and overflowed into the White Nile, was about 3,900 to 4,320 years ago. So at about approximately 2300 to 1900 BC, if we're thinking in Egyptian terms, those living downriver in the Sudan and in Egypt would have observed the effects of this flooding from the lake. This would have been at the time of about the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, that the waters would have been high and that the crocodiles could have swam into Lake Turkana. It's an ironic time frame because I can recall authors who date the deluge, the flood myth, from the Bible at about 2348 BCE. So this would be, we talked about the first flood would have been the filling of all of the Earth's ocean. The second flood would have been the refilling of the Mediterranean Sea after it dried out about 5 million years ago. The third flood would have been Lake Victoria filling up. The fourth flood would have been the Nile River flooding downriver anyone who lived along the river. Um, so that's what we're talking about right there. Um, the results of the flooding becoming another flood myth for any of the survivors who are still alive to tell about it. Experts use Moloch shells to radiocarbon date the history of the lake's water level. The lake level was as high as 460 meters higher than its present level today, or about 1,300 feet. This is equal to about the height of the International Finance Center in Hong Kong. The height was determined by the mollusks found at these ancient shorelines, dated to early to mid-Holocene, found at 10 meters higher than the sill that would allow the lake to drain into the western Sabat catchment and the White Nile. So we talked about that. Earlier than this, from about the time of the late Miocene, which is after 10 million years ago, to about 1.9 million years ago, the lake overflowed to the southeast and into the Indian Ocean. So before it flowed into the Nile, it was flowing down in this direction into any rivers or valleys that were here, all the way into the Indian Ocean, which is right here. So this area, you can see how elevation kind of drops down here. There's some mountain ranges. There's the rift in here. Earliest people were living around here. So the lake is overflowing and flooding down into here and spilling into the Indian Ocean. So people were probably right in this area because obviously they want to stay near water. The water isn't over here yet. It's over here. We should expect that a population of people existed and inhabited this area to the south, and which is actually in the direction of the Orovai Gorge. So you probably all heard about the Orovai Gorge, where a lot of earliest fossil sites have been found. It must have flowed into rivers that drained into the Indian Ocean. Tectonic shifts resulted in the switch to the overflowing occurring to the western side of the lake. Evidence from Lake Malawi, Lake Bosantui, and Lake Tanganyika indicate widespread mega drought conditions in tropical Africa prior to 75,000 years ago. So drier conditions in these areas prior to 7,000 years ago. So probably desert-like conditions. And we can see we have the Chalbi Desert right here near Lake Turkana, which covers a pretty wide area within Kenya. So these are early desert people, which, to bring up again the camel. So people, maybe it's possible that because of these early drought conditions, people moved out of East Africa into other areas. The overflow into the White Nile catchment has occurred for at least 1.3 million years, and the most recent flooding into it occurred about 11,500 to 7,800 years ago during the early Holocene period. The area around Lake Turkana has been inhabited by various human-like primates and hominids for at least the past 20 million years, since the early Miocene period. Some of the earliest evidence can be found at the site of Bulak on the eastern side of the lake, just east of the Sibilo National Park. And let me show you where that is. So Buluk, excuse my pronunciations, I apologize. So Buluk is right here, east side of Lake Turkana. The Sibilo National Park is actually right around here on the east side of Lake Turkana. So this is where some of the earliest fossil finds has been found, right here at Buluk. At this site, fossils have been found of the early ape Proconsul africanus, who was a small-sized ape about the size of a gibbon and who was adapted to living in trees. Proconsul is estimated to go back as far as 28 million years ago. Early specimens have been found in many areas, including two dated to 22 million years ago in Kenya and the other nearby at Rusinging Island in Lake Nyanza. That's Lake Victoria, dated to 18 million years ago. Let me show you where that is at. Rusinga Island. Rusinga Island is right here. What are we talking about? Right here. Earliest fossils, more than 20 million years ago, of Proconsul. Proconsul is where I begin our earliest ancestors from. You can go back farther than that if you want to. I don't feel that it's necessary. I feel they named Proconsul his name for a reason. We'll discuss that. The earliest was found in the Tenderet region in western Kenya, just east of the Lake Victoria, and dated to 22.5 million years ago. Other sites, such as Napak in eastern Uganda, Songhor. So we got Songhor. So when you see H-O-R, that's the name of Horus. Take out the O, just H-R. That's the god Horus or Heru. So it's interesting their names while they naming these sites. Sanghor and Koru, Kor, similar in western Kenya, are approximately contemporaneous sites. So all of those sites, Napak in eastern Uganda, Sanghor, and Koru, are all approximately contemporaneous about more than 20 million years ago where they found Proconsul at. Let me show you where those are at. Napak, Koru, I don't have the other one on here. You can see Koru. You can see Nopak, Moroto here, Moboko Island. So you see these sites. All three of these, Rusinga Island, Moboko Island, Kenya, and Koru, are just south of the equator. So the earliest human-like primates are developing just south of Kenya. And we got others, not sure if they spread here. They probably did. They probably spread from south to north. We got them in Napak, Moroto in Uganda, and we got Buluk in Kenya, northwestern Kenya. These are some of the earliest sites, more than 20 million years ago. Nowhere on Earth are there any other sites this early that they've found so far. Maybe they'll find some in the future. I don't know. From the early fossil finds that have been found in the area of inhabitants during this period from about 28 to 5 million years ago, at the very beginning of human evolution, the patterns of migration seem to have originated south and west of Lake Turkana and then spread up and around Lake Turkana from the groups moving north, while another group or groups also went south into the Serengeti Plain and into the Orovai Gorge. Proconsul, the oldest known representative of the hominoids, is found at Moroto, Uganda, Napak, Uganda, Sanghor, Kenya, and Rusing Island, which are all more westernly compared to the overlapping hominoid, meaning around approximately the same time, Kenyapithecus, who dwelled in the east and who was a hominid which appeared about 15 million years ago during the early late Miocene. So 5 million years later, and which is much more like the living great apes of today. So Kenyapithecus is much more like the living apes of today. He's evolving more east, so probably moved from west to east, from south to north. So you got Proconsul is developing in the west, and later on, Kenyapithecus is developing in the east. Kenyapithecus fossils are found in the more eastern sites like Moboko Island, Fort Turner, and Samburu Hills, and also at Buluk, which is just northeast of Lake Turkana near Oma. So Kenyapithecus is also found at Buluk up here with Proconsul. It's interesting to note the meaning of Proconsul's name here. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary online, Proconsul is a governor or a military commander of an ancient Roman province, or an administrator in a modern colony with wide powers. The etymological meaning of the word proconsul takes the prefix pro, coming from per, the Proto-Indo-European roots, meaning to lead, or before, or the first, or a chief. I feel this is a very appropriate for the first recognized ancestor leading to the line of our very own species. So our species can be traced back to Proconsul, and they named him very appropriately, in my opinion. The second part of the word consul We should think of a group of proconsul primate leaders gathering in a circle together, consulting with each other, maybe over food or over a female or some other reason. This quite possibly could be a group of females instead of males consulting together, which is a characteristic seen in chimpanzees. Below there is a map of the early East African inhabitant zone and a picture of a reconstructed proconsul. Notice that proconsul did not have a tail, which is a key characteristic of apes from the beginning. Also interesting is that even today, but very rare, some humans are still born with a tail. So I can't see my picture in this preview. Okay, here's a picture of here's a picture of what proconsul looks like. No tail, 5 toes, 5 fingers. If you look at this map, you can see I have, this is a map made in GIS software. This is a lot more, I made this map on my own. You can see the sites. Rosinga Island, Kenya, Maboko Island, Sangkor, Kenya, Tenderneret, Kenya, Fort Turner, Kenya, Kora, Kenya. All of these sites are south of the equator. You see Nigorora, Kenya, Samburu Hills, Kenya, Moroto, Uganda, Napak, Uganda, Bulak, all these early sites. So this is where the very earliest primates were at. In Kenya and in northeast Uganda, mostly south of the equator. Okay. The Great Rift Valley is still very active today, and the changes that are taking place there still make it the current and continuous womb of the earth, the birthplace of new and advanced types of life. There must be a reason for this that biologists and geologists know more about than I do. Of the specific elements and gases from volcanoes that exist in this part of the world which make it unique compared to others. The rift has provided all the necessary requirements to create life and the human body. Most of all the earliest hominid sites are located in the rift. It is here where we should look to find the items that are necessary for creation of the human species. We would like to know more about the sun's direct effect on the creation of life in this region, obviously close to the equator. It receives more direct UV rays and warmth. It would be easier to assume and it would not require a PhD in order to make the education assumption that the sun's light, the warmth from the sun, all of the water available in the rift and the surrounding Great Lakes, the volcanoes, and the specific food types available, and many other contributing factors like the minerals in the water help to create human life here. So help to evolve humans from a primate state into a human state, right? Help to make us more intelligent. It would be necessary for us to go back farther than the proconsul species to follow the evolution of mammals to its source, which we won't do now, but we will be covered in another chapter, maybe. According to Smith, the rift steadily receives heat unevenly from the sun and then loses it unevenly. He also says the earth also creates its own heat as radioactive elements within the depths of the earth break down. Oh, as radioactive elements within the depths of the earth break down. At the same time, in which should definitely be considered keeping a holistic view, meaning an entire view encompassing everything, is that the universe is also active and alive, bombarding the solar system with cosmic rays. Everything is working together. Creation hasn't stopped. Rifts are, and mountains are, created from the movements of the Earth's tectonic plates. As they crunch together, they create mountains, pushing the crust together and forcing it up from the center. As they pull back apart, the middle breaks apart, creating rifts of large cracks in the surface. They do not completely split the plates from each other. The Great Rift was beginning to form about 65 million years ago, with just a few mountains showing up first. It began to become more livelier and busier at an estimated 40 million years ago. This was before there was ever a human-like ancestor or anything resembling an ape. The Great Rift, the Great Rift's age precedes Proconsul's age by about 15 million years ago. Mammals began to exist at about 80 million years ago, and therefore there were probably many different types of mammals living in the region. Fish began to exist about 500 million years ago. The rift extends all the way from Lebanon to Mozambique, and within it is the Omo River, the river of Eve and her family, and a chain of lakes inside of the rift slices through Kenya. Lakes such as Turkana, Boringo, Bogoria, Nakuru, Elmintiera, Naivasha, Magadi, Natrun, and Manyara are all important lakes found inside the rift and most likely used as water sources, which are alkaline water sources. Although it's not assumed that great apes needed to drink a lot of water compared to the unnecessary standards of human consumption of water today. Great apes received much of their water that they needed from eating fruits and plants. Lake Victoria is not a part of the rift system, but is actually in the middle of the eastern and western rifts. The plates are being pulled east and west, which causes a north and south divide. During the past 30 million years, hundreds of thousands of cubic kilometers of ash and lava have been deposited in the Rift Valley. These separations of plates create fault lines that are always accompanied by an earthquake, which is a dramatic release of energy. More earthquakes occur in the western rift than in the east, and Madagascar was actually created by a rift about 100 million years ago. So where's Madagascar? This is the island Madagascar that broke off of Africa over in, is it this area? It would have created a nose for Africa. Broke off either around here or around here. But this is the island of Madagascar. And it was created by a rift about 100 million years ago. So there was another rift along here that split open. The ocean poured in, creating Madagascar Island, which is the same thing that they think is going to happen to the Horn of Africa. So the Horn of Africa, the Rift Valley is spreading through here, down through here. This is the eastern one. So it's possible that this horn might break off and create its own island, or it can come over here through the western and break off this whole piece of East Africa, and then you'll have ocean in the middle here. That probably won't happen for another millions of years. Sorry, I gotta keep finding my place where I was at. Okay. Volcanoes emerge from the splitting of the earth, creating vents that release huge amounts of energy and steam. When energy builds up inside or beneath a volcano, it will eventually cause a massive explosion which spreads all of the rock, minerals, and other ingredients across the region, which may help to precipitate life and help with Earth's other global systems. Think of rain sprinkling on the ground, and a few days later, plants and grasses emerge. Volcanoes usually emerge by themselves. However, that wasn't the case with the Varingas of eastern Zaire, which also arose in connection with the Western Rift. Zaire is the old name of the Congo, which arose in connection with the Western Rift and include dead volcanoes such as Makino and Korishimbi. Aside from volcanoes, hydrothermal vents have been discovered. In April of 1987, sublacustral hydrothermal vents with associated massive sulfides were discovered at Pimba and Cape Banza on the Zaire side of the northern basin of Lake Tanganyika. So we're talking about right here in this area is where they're talking about. This is the Congo. This is Lake Tanganyika. Anytime sulfides or sulfur are mentioned, we should pay attention to its assistance of creating life. Keep that in mind, sulfur. These are inactive faults at temperatures of 53 degrees Celsius, which is 127 degrees Fahrenheit, to 103 degrees Celsius, or 217 degrees Fahrenheit. These vents create pyrite tubes in the form of iron sulfides. Gold and crystal-like, which is the chemical formula of FeS2, and they create marcasites, which are more of a tin-like color. Same formula of FeS2. However, their crystal structure looks different from the pyrite. They both contain the disulfide ion formula S2 and 2 negative ion. Aragonite also forms. It consists of calcium carbonate and is crystal-like as well. NaHCO3 also forms to enrich the fluids. This is sodium bicarbonate, so like baking soda. It is also found in the lakes of Magadi and Bogoria. NaCl, so chloride salt, also exists as brines. Brines are solutions containing a lot of salt. Abundant white or reddish-brown microbial colonies resembling Beggiato mats were found surrounding the active vents. These hydrothermal vents are critical to understanding early life and are considered to be the origin of life on Earth. Sulfur and salt, therefore, sulfur and salt must be crucial to life. There are many vents found all over the world. However, ones found around the equator should be studied first. Okay, so let's go ahead and stop there. I think that's a good place to stop. Um, a lot of information there. For me, all of these things that I'm talking about are important to life, which is why I think life formed here in this area in particular first instead of anywhere else on Earth. All these different ions, chemicals, sulfur, salt, the volcanoes, the water, helped to create life and helped intelligence to form and evolve into a higher intelligence. We'll go ahead and stop there. Please do me a favor, subscribe, like my video, leave a comment. I hope you enjoyed this lecture 3, degree 3, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.